I think there's some cost to it, but there's also cost to not doing it. And so lost revenue, just mistakes. So we're so glad that we did that.
Hi, I'm Wyatt.
And I'm Grace.
And you're listening to Our Dad and your host of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Moore. I'm coming back with our Friday interviews, kind of end the week on a high note where we get to talk to you. These are my favorite conversations where we get to talk to successful short-term rental owners willing to share the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between of their journey into short-term rental investing. And today we've got Jason and Gina Royer joining us. They're part of our 1% club. And guys, I'm really excited to talk to you guys and, for your willingness to share your journey. So thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I always like to start just to kind of break the ice and then roll back the time a little bit and tell me your background, just to say, tell everybody where you're from, what pays the bills, and then kind of ultimately what got us interested in real estate investing, and then also led you down the short-term rental road of real estate investing.
Okay. I've been a real estate agent since 2002. So just always been in that game. And 2008, when that happened, started to buy some properties, long-term rentals, flip properties, that kind of thing. And then, I always wanted to buy a place in Florida, always. But we had discussions and we're like, well, we don't always want a vacation there in the same place. That means we got to go to the same place every time. And then that sort of changed when I think we went to Destin, and we were like, we paid this much for this week. Why are we not doing this? So it must have been our conversations, and then you popped up in Facebook, and then the rest is history, right?
Yeah, the haunting you on Facebook because your phone hears everything you're doing or saying, right? And then all of a sudden absolutely. We tap into it. Right. Gina, what's your background?
I'm an airline pilot for Republic Airways. I started flying right out of college, and then once I was pregnant with my oldest, I stopped flying and went on maternity leave and didn't go back. So stayed at home for 12 years and then went back just about 5 years ago. So with those travel benefits, we wanted to, see the world a little bit more, and so Florida came about. But also, we want to see other places, and we don't want to have to pay as much to see those places. And so, Jason talked. He found you first, and then through our conversation, you found us. Found me through the Facebook feed, and then we just got interested and flew out and met you and knew that you were legit. Because I'm no more. I don't take as many risks as Jason does. So then we started in with the education, and that was priceless.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate it. And I loved that you guys did that. Like, there's very few people do take the time to do that, right? And I know with your benefits of being able to travel and all that stuff, it makes it maybe a little bit easier, but you still had to take the time. And you guys came out and said, hey, listen, before we do anything, before we move forward, want to get any help, we want to come meet you in the office. We want to come talk to you. I loved that you guys did that. And I wish more people would take the time to do some of that stuff, because on the front end, you could see that we're not operating out of our office, at least, or my basement. I had an office, right? Not just like operate in my basement. It's a real operation. At the time, we were even smaller than we are now, but you still came and saw, hey, listen, this is, they're really doing this. They have a real company. And so, it's interesting because Jason, with your background too, like you've been in real estate for a long time. You guys have done fix and flips. You've done other types of investments, and really, and I think that people that are in real estate, honestly, they realize that real estate is not one big bucket. It's there's a lot of lanes and smaller, asset classes that have very specific pros and cons within real estate. And it's, from the outside looking in, if you've never been in real estate, a lot of times people think, well, I don't really, it's kind of all the same. It's really not, right? And you were able to realize that, hey, listen, this is going to be a different lane that we haven't run down before. Let's try to figure out how we can accelerate that progress and at least try to mitigate our risk going down. It's like, hey, listen, we love Florida. want to buy something. We know that we don't want to go there every single vacation, which a typical second home, you feel obligated to go every single time if you're not, using it as an asset as well. And, because I've owned both, and you do feel like that. Like when I owned, before I got into short-term rentals, I've had second homes and vacation homes. And Teresa would always say, I'm like, let's go to the cabin for the weekend. Let's go to the cabin for the weekend. She got tired of me saying that. She's like, do we always have to go to the cabin? I'm like, we're paying a mortgage on this thing every single month. We might as well use it, right? And so then, a long time ago, we started in 2006 is when I started realizing, holy crap, I don't have to use it every weekend. I can rent it out. Somebody else can use it. I don't feel guilty or obligated because I'm paying this mortgage payment. So that was kind of the thought process for you guys. It sounds like getting into and thinking about the short-term rentals. It was ultimately, we want this asset. We love going there. Look how much we pay when we do go. Let's start to stack assets in our favor. But also when we want to go do something else, we can do them. So motivation, very similar to a lot of people. So we met, we started going through the process. Take me from there on. Did you guys already know the exact market, everything else you wanted to go buy in? Like you guys were pretty specific on where you were at, or did you bounce around a little bit?
No, we really bounced around a lot. I feel like I was looking on Zillow up and down the Florida Peninsula, every single area I could. Tried to buy a place in Destin, didn't work out. We were kind of glad that it didn't, because we were able to just. I think the prices were a lot higher than where we're at now. Ended up being over close to Melbourne, Florida, on the Atlantic side. We have family that stays down there, and my parents actually go down there in the winter, and so they knew a lot about it, and so we kind of visited down there. It's a little warmer too in the wintertime, and prices are better, and we were able to find a property down there, and it's been good and it's been bad.
Right. Let's talk. We were talking before we hit play. I always say, we always talk about, like, part of these conversations, we don't want to just talk about the good. So I'd love to hear some of the challenges. It helps us figure out how we came through some of those. And so like when you say it's been good and bad, take me through that process. Like we figured out, like, okay, we finally nailed down where we wanted to go. We bought the property down there. And then, so take us through that, like some of the challenges that we faced. And then, ultimately, you guys are, part of our 1% club, which means you're operating at the very top of that market. So there's, you've obviously overcome them and you've had some good success down there as well. And so let's walk through that. That's why I love these types of conversations.
Sure. I think, this property does really, really well. But it also brings us problems. I think, and it's more with the property. I think we have sold this property in our heads 10 different times. I think that we may actually turn and sell it and put it into another property, but I just don't know. There's just been problems we've had, sewer problem, or plumbing issues, and with one of the worst things you can have is you have guests there and you've got sewer backup into the house, and like stuff like that. I don't wish that on anyone. So we just had to overcome stuff like that. We think we fix it, and then something else pops up. We think we fix it, something else pops up. Now we really think we have fixed it. So we are set to sell this place, and then now we're going to fix it up. We're going to go into the hot season, and we won't want to sell it. So that's kind of how the transgression goes.
Another challenge that we had at the very beginning was finding a good property managing team. We started off with a very nationwide property management company, and we learned very quickly that they did not fit with us. And so we went to a local property management team, and they did okay, but what we found was it was a job to them, and they didn't care. So Jason overtook the property management about a year and a half ago, and since then, it has really made a huge difference. He does absolutely spend more time, but we have seen the profit in that tremendously. The bookings increased because he does such a good job of communicating, and he cares. So he does, he communicates well.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about that, about a month ago when you guys were in Utah for our 1% club meeting. And it was interesting that in our, entire Vodacy portfolio, probably 90% of the people use property management companies. They don't have the time or the effort that they want to put into managing these properties. But interestingly enough, the top 1% group, about 90% of our top 1% group actually self-manage. And so it was really interesting to see that. And we talked a little bit about that because, I don't manage my own properties, right? I hire property managers and I don't do that. And we were talking about that a little bit at our group meeting. And the difference is, like you said, when you have a property manager and just treats it like a job, nobody's going to do as good a job on your property as you are, period. Right. So if you've got the time and the effort to be able to put into it, it's not even comparing apples and apples. It's saying, hey, you're going to do a better job. And you guys are seeing the fruits of that labor of saying, hey, listen, I was able to have the time. I was able to put the effort into it. And the difference in the profitability, the guest experience, everything elevates and ultimately puts you, allows you to operate at the top of that market, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is, and I always say management, and we'll start there and then let's talk about some of the other challenges you had with, and try to, I always like to talk about the challenges and then look back and say, what could we have done to mitigate that? Some things just happen, right? But on the management side, let's I've always said, it's the Achilles heel of the short-term rental business. Really deciding and getting either the right partner on the management side or deciding how you're going to operate and do it yourself, right? It's one of the big decisions and probably one of the biggest decisions long-term that you're going to make on how to operate the management on your portfolio. And there are markets that even if you interview, 10, 12, 15 of them, and Florida markets are a very good example of this, that a lot of the options are the bigger companies, right? The bigger management companies, and they're established and they've got hundreds of properties in their portfolio. And it is you're just a number to them. You're just one of many in their portfolio. They're not necessarily interested in maximizing that asset because they don't really have to. They just need to get a certain number of nights filled and they make their money, right? And they don't really care about pricing as much. They're just they're always constantly hounding owners to say, just drop your price, because they don't care. It's just kind of almost a race to the bottom. Let's get a night booked. We'll take our 20 or 30% because 30% to them or 20% to them off of $300 versus $200 isn't that big of a deal because they have hundreds of properties doing that. And they're just like, I'd rather get the nights booked and take my percentage and not worry about that the owner's not paying their bills with those numbers. Right. And I love the small boutique companies that have 10 to 12 properties and they don't make any money unless they're maximizing them, right? But sometimes they're really hard to find. I'm curious if you guys ran across any smaller ones when you were in the search and what led you to choosing some of the bigger ones in those markets in the very beginning stages.
It was probably me that wanted to choose the big one. I think they just sold me on some of their marketing and that kind of thing, and they were good at that. And they are still good at that, but
very good. Yes,
their hands-on approach to it was not good.
Right.
So we talked to a couple others, but I was pretty adamant about it. Gina Royer was going the other way with it, but she took my advice, and sometimes that's just not the right thing to do.
Hey, Gina, we're learning from lessons. It's like, don't always take Jason's advice, right? we're trying to learn from the mistakes. And so that's what Teresa would say about me too. She's like, okay, you're the one that said, learn from my past mistakes. I'm not listening to you anymore. No, but no, you're exactly right. Now, the reason I asked that question is those big companies are marketing machines. Their front end marketing is awesome. And there's not any small boutique company that I've seen because they don't have the budget to rival those management companies. However, the marketing on the back end is not very good, right? They don't market individual properties. What they do is market big portfolios. They market their brand and they put the money into kind of marketing that brand so they look really good on the front end. But that marketing on the back end doesn't bring extra business and to individual properties doesn't help you maximize. And so it is a very, very, very common mistake. And I'm glad we're talking about this on management is that we, on the front end, get more lured to the professional aspect. Their SOPs are right on line. They're like everything they go through. And you talk to some of the smaller boutique companies You're like, man, they don't even hardly seem like they're running it like a business, right? And they are, but they don't articulate it as well. But what I always look for in those small companies is, do they have the passion for hospitality and delivering a great experience? Like, I don't care how they found me or how I found them. A lot of times I have to go find them because their marketing is not very good on to even find me, right? And but they become really good partners for me on the back end. And I've found that the bigger companies that do amazing front end marketing, they're big because they do that. First of all, right? They're good at that. Like, give them credit for what they're doing. They're building a bigger company. They make more money, but at the end of the day, we don't individually make more money with them. And it's a hard lesson to learn sometimes, that doesn't always equate to the back end. And you guys saw that firsthand. And so it's one of those things that is, when we talk about it, like in the Vodacy group, and I always say I lean toward those smaller companies, the reason is just that, but they don't always look as good on the front end, right? When you're talking to them and seeing their marketing materials, but you have to remember that marketing materials for the properties don't look that way either. That's marketing materials for their entire portfolio, and which is why it's tough for them to maximize your assets on the back end. And so we decided to run down the self-managing. How, just out of like, because a lot of people say, how long does it take to self-manage? Like, you hear online all the time, you're spending 15 minutes a month and a couple minutes a day or whatever it ends up being. I'm curious on, and I know you guys are in a seasonal market, so if it's hot season, summertime, it's different than when right now going into the winter season. But on average, how much time do you spend managing the property to do a good job with it?
I think, I think once you get it set up, I think in the setup stage, you're spending a lot of time with it. That's the most hectic and difficult portion of it, especially if you use some property management software, which we do. Once you get that set up, it really helps you because you can automate a lot of stuff. I still want that personal touch, so it doesn't sound automated. So I try to do that. But now that we've got it set up, I don't know that I spend more than an hour a day specifically on it. Some days maybe more, but I think once you get it set up, you don't have to spend a ton of time on it.
And that's on a total of 3 properties now too, not just one.
Right. Because it's set up on the same system and you can use the same systems, right? How much does it increase during peak season versus slow season?
Oh, it'll be, it's going to be more. Just, we are close to the Space Coast, so I always monitor like the rocket launches and they go on, and I try to reach out and touch base with the people just on a personal level. Hey, there's a rocket launch at 5:30 tonight. You should go see it. When there's always people in there, I'm constantly trying to reach out or tell them about a good beach to go to or restaurants and that kind of thing. So it's busier because it'll stay very, very, very busy in the summertime for sure.
Right. How many hours though? Like if I had to pin you down and say, how many hours are you spending in the summertime? Like, and the reason I'm trying to pin you down is and I would assume that if somebody's going to self-manage, they should be doing the things you're doing. They should be taking the extra time. Don't just automate it, because if you just automate everything and try to make it 5 minutes a day because everything's automated, and the systems will do that. You can set your systems up to do that where everything is automated, but then all of a sudden you're going to perform just like the big management companies that automate everything. And so, and there's a lot of people who listen that are trying to help, trying to make that decision. Do I have the time to do this?
I would say on average, it's probably 5 to 10 hours a week.
5 to 10 hours a week. Yeah. Good. And that's awesome. And I love that. Appreciate that, because again, I don't know, because I don't manage my own properties. I do say it's not, I don't think it's, I don't think it's 15, 20 minutes a week. I think it's more than that. And that might be if it's automated. Okay. Now second layer question onto that, because it's a question we get all the time and you guys would be able to know this, is 5 to 10 hours a week on average to commit to that. How much of it is like on demand? You have to be available. You respond within minutes, like that kind of, how often do you feel like 24/7 concierge versus stuff that you can kind of schedule out that 5 to 10 hours?
Oh, I think a lot of it is last second or immediate stuff.
Right.
Not really had any situations where it's been an emergency or in the middle of the night. I think one time
Right.
I didn't have my phone on and people couldn't get into the house at like midnight. Um, that was a bad situation. I've learned to keep my phone ringer on in case that happens, but we really don't, we haven't ran into really any issues in that aspect. But yes, I think you got to respond back quickly, I think.
Right. Totally agree with you. I totally agree. And that's why I ask it, because I've heard people say, you don't need to respond back. It's not an emergency. It's not 911. You can respond back later, but that just draws away from that customer experience. We do, when a guest has a question, especially in hospitality, they, even though it's not a 911 type of an emergency, in their mind, it's like, I want the answer. Right. And being able to do that elevates the guest experience. And so, and that's why I always tell everybody that is kind of considering that is, do you have the flexibility to answer quickly? Right. Because if you do, and it's not going to be a big distraction, then that might still be something you can do, because the 5 to 10 hours is not always scheduled out where you're, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this, an extra 2 hours every night after work. That's not how the hours shake out. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Awesome. Love it. So now let's go to some of the issues we had with the property and you said, sewer backups, we had plumbing issues, we have things that we've been fixing up. Was this an older property when you bought it? Like, was it, I'm assuming it was a little bit older.
Yeah, but it wasn't in horrible shape. I mean, we came in and painted it and did some freshening up of things, but yeah, it is an older 50s house.
Yeah. Okay. So I wondered that because of like when you talk about sewer systems or stuff like that, you're like, okay, it's been old enough that probably, something happened with a pipe, it got crushed or something like that, or just old, right? Roots grow in pipes and they have to be, cleaned out. You guys have been in real estate long.
Yeah,
Is that what happened?
Yeah. So,
yeah, it's, so I know that you have been, with your background in real estate, obviously you did, I'm assuming, obviously, maybe I should ask the question before saying obviously. How was the property inspection? I'm assuming you did a property inspection and this stuff obviously didn't show up, or you would have kind of expected it and mitigated it.
Yeah, it didn't show up. Some things weren't disclosed to us. I don't remember if I did a sewer scope, and I would definitely recommend that to anyone doing an inspection.
Yeah. And that's why I asked that, because most of the time on property inspections, we don't do sewer inspections, right? We're not going to throw a line down the sewer pipe and inspect it. And I have had a sewer backup in a long-term rental before. And just even if nobody's in there with a sewer backup, it is not something anybody wants to deal with. You don't wish a sewer backup on your worst enemy. It's one of my worst things in properties. And ever since then, if I have a property that's more than 25 to 30 years old, I always do a sewer line inspection. And I'll even do it sooner than that if there's a whole bunch of trees and everything in the yard. If there's a lot of like bigger trees and things like that, we'll do a sewer line inspection. And they're not that expensive. And I'm guessing once you guys, now that you've experienced that, you're probably going to do the same thing, especially if it's not a brand new home.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Janie, you're kind of smiling back there and laughing. You're like, okay, you don't ever want to do that again, right?
Yeah, it's just caused lots of issues and lots of money. So a sewer inspection, a couple $100 is nothing.
It is, right, and it's not something that a lot of us think about during the inspection period, right? Is septic inspections, sewer inspections. A lot of people in the short-term rental world, we have properties that have septic systems. They're not hooked up to city or county sewer, and we've got septic systems. We've had a number of members have septic failures as well. And so they're just expensive, nasty problems to deal with. And it's not something that you want to deal with. And so I always this is a great reason why we have these types of conversations is if you're buying properties I always do a septic inspection now, even if it's brand new septic system. We do septic inspections, and then I always do a sewer line inspection if it's after a certain, if it's 20 to 30 years old, that's when we start to worry about the sewer lines. So talk to me about some of the other issues that we came up. Like that's not something maybe we could have seen it. Maybe we could have seen it coming. Was it caused by tree roots? I think I cut you off when you were telling me what it was about.
Yeah, it had the old galvanized piping, and yes, there was some tree roots, and I don't even know. I feel like we have went through every single pipe in that house, trying to fix stuff, and it all seemed to be in one certain location, but ultimately, I think it was roots.
Right. And that would show up in an inspection, honestly. And they can go in and you'll be able to see that with an inspection. If it's a crushed sewer line from heavy equipment or some work that was being done outside, that doesn't show up. Obviously, that happens. It's an event that happens that crushes the line. But typically it's one of those two things. Something, there's either construction going on, crushes your line, and or roots that are, like you said, those old galvanized pipes, they'll rust out and sometimes they just collapse. So if they're really old, but a lot of times it's the tree roots that cause the problem. And those do show up in inspection. So how do we mitigate risk? Spend a few $100, do a sewer line inspection, right? And so we're starting to put together, fix the problem. We're like, let's sell this thing. We fixed it. Then we start getting pot committed. We're like, well, it's producing and we fixed it. And so it's pretty much everything's done. Right. So you keep going back and forth on that. So it sounds like that's the kind of the back and forth on it, because it's a producing property for you. It's just been a producer that's been a bit of a headache.
Yeah. It seems like all the profit we make, we end up putting back into it. But yeah, I don't know. We need to reap the benefits of no repairs.
So. Go a year with no repairs. What are some of the other big ones? Is most of it revolving around this sewer stuff, or are there other things?
There were some drainage issues too that weren't disclosed, where we had to do some work to the outside of the house with heavy rains. It was leaking inside, and just stuff like that should have been disclosed. And we can't do anything about that.
Right.
But nothing was disclosed to us in that fact. So
you fix it. You're fixing it with drainage and probably just landscaping, right? A lot of times you landscape, make sure everything drains away from the house instead of in. What about your how have you fared with? Have you had to worry about any, like Florida, right? You're on the Florida coastline and you got hurricane season every year. Have you had to deal with any major storms in that aspect?
This last one. So this is a tri-level house in Florida. I didn't think anything of this either. Please don't buy a tri-level house in Florida.
Less than a mile from the beach.
Yeah. So, we've lived in a tri-level before. We didn't think anything of it. We live in Indiana. Just the groundwater level is very high. And so when you get those hurricanes, you get a little water coming in. And so I actually went down there and rode out the hurricane through Milton just to be there when I knew water would come in, because we're going to get a ton of rain. So that's the only one that we really had issues with, I think. But over on that side, we don't typically get hit with the big hurricanes as much as the Gulf side does. So,
right.
Yeah.
So when you say, explain to people what that you mean by don't buy tri-level. It's not the above ground area you're worried about, right? It's below grade, right?
It is. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
The drainage issue was fixed, but because the water was so saturated with all of the rain, then it was just coming in like from underneath the house.
Right. Right. And that's foundations are not necessarily waterproof. Like people, a lot of the times you can waterproof the walls, but the floor itself, foundation floors are not. And so when you go below grade, and I'm from Utah as well, and basements are normal. Like everybody has basements, right? Everybody has below grade living. And you don't think a lot about it until you go to an area with a really high groundwater level. And like in Florida, and when these storms come in and that groundwater level swells, and all of a sudden it's like there's concrete cracks, and there's cracks in concrete, period, and it's going to seep through, and you're dealing with it on probably a regular basis, and probably that house probably always has been. And as much as you try to mitigate it, it's hard to mitigate because it's concrete, and concrete has cracks, especially when it's below grade. And while it's not an issue most of the time, it's a headache when it is, right? When, water's just a flat out headache when it happens to deal with. And so I totally understand the fact of saying, hey, listen, we're gonna take this property. Probably, even though we fixed it up, we're like, where can we place the money back again? But it's interesting. You said, if we're going to sell it, we're not getting out of the game. We want to find something that's a little more set up for maybe the environment, but also like, so that we can just like, we know what we're doing. We're having a good time with it. We're making money with it, but all the money we're making, we're putting back in it. And that's in it. So it's like, if you did it again, that sounds like the lessons that you would take from it is saying, okay, now I'm going to really look at the environment, right? You guys are from Indiana, went down to Florida. Have you ever bought any other properties down in Florida at all? Or is this the first one?
This was our first one.
Right.
We have another one that we bought after that one.
After that. Yeah. So, so tell me how you looked at that second one differently.
Second one is a condo.
Okay.
It was on the second floor. So that...
So right there, we're like, okay, we're going. Was that intentional? Like you were like, we don't want to deal with the house on the ground anymore.
Not necessarily, but
okay.
It's a condo complex that we had vacationed at multiple times. And so we just had talked to the property management there and just said, hey, if anything ever comes up, let us know. And they reached out to us. So we were able to buy that off market. And so that's kind of how that fell into place.
If you do end up selling this one, right? Even after you fix it up and everything's fine, if you do end up selling it, what would be the plan what would be the next plan?
Somewhere out west.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And probably a condo.
Yeah. Tell me about that, Gina. Why a condo versus a single family home?
We learned a lot with it, that, like the HOA may be high, but they're taking care. I mean, all of that cost in the HOA is going to go somewhere, and they're going to take care of it for us. We don't have to worry about when it snows, getting somebody to come do snow removal. All of those types of things. You're going to pay for it somewhere, and if it's all bunched together in the HOA with somebody that knows what they're doing and is on site and can get a hold of it right away, that's so much easier when you're that far away. For us, at least.
For sure. And I asked that because I totally agree with you. People always ask, condo, single family home, what way should I go? I said, listen, I own both. I can tell you the easiest ones to own are condos because just like you said, there's people on site taking care of the immediate issues, especially when it comes to any weather issues, access issues, anything like that. They're right there. Typically you have really nice amenities. There are things that you can deal with. Like you guys get handle the things that you want to handle and not all the stuff that you don't want to handle necessarily, if that makes sense. Like you can get the decorations designed, the customer experience all handled on the inside, and somebody else is dealing with all the stuff and the elements on the outside. And there's something to be said about that. And you're exactly right. You're going to pay for it one way or the other, right? Your HOA fee can be high at times. It can be really high at times, depending on how many amenities the community has and what environment it's in. If it's in, insurance is really high, or even in like the ski hills where you're out west and the snow removal is, every other day, like you're going to have a higher HOA for some of that stuff. But if you have a single family home, you're going to have to pay for it anyway. You're going to have somebody go plowing out the driveways and shoveling the snow for your guests because they're not doing it. And so one way or the other, you're paying for it. And it's a lot easier sometimes just in condos. And I love condos for that reason. And townhome situations, depending on where we're at. I own both, but it's not, and both of them have pros and cons. And to your guys' point, you're kind of getting wore out on the single family one. And it's like, maybe we go the less, for you guys, like we want to still stay in really nice areas, but also the other thing that's a benefit of condos is proximity is a little bit better a lot of times, right? Like your beach one, you're on the beach, right? And, the house isn't right on the beach, but the condo is going to be, your proximity is going to be right on the beach. You go out west and you're in a mountain area or a resort mountain area, you're going to be really close to the ski hills. You're going to be right next to all the restaurants. Like the proximity typically for the condos, townhomes is better. And, where you can, I shouldn't say better, they're single family homes with great proximity too, but they cost a lot of money, right? And so, you can get better proximity with a condo townhome because you're sharing that in the cost of that location with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, so have we decided whether we're selling it or not? I know you guys you say you've decided 10 times to sell it, and then 10 times we pull it back off, right? Or do we
Today
know
it's
what
for
we're,
sale.
yeah. Yeah. Stay tuned, right? We'll have to do it. We'll do another one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but not till next year. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Get you're like, hey, listen, and I, I agree. I used to have a truck like that once. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put a transmission in, put an engine in, do all this. I'm selling this truck all the time, and then I'm like, I'm not selling it. I've put too much money in this thing. I'm like pot committed. It might. So you guys may never get rid of it. You got it how you want it. You might never get rid of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Awesome.
true.
So as we kind of wrap up, right? We've covered a lot of, kind of what would you do different? Like if we did it again, how do we navigate it different? What are kind of the lessons we're learning from it? But I always ask you guys at the end of every episode, anybody that's on with me, is if you had to go back to your younger self and say, and it doesn't have to be specifically to, I would have done an inspection or whatever. Is there any piece of advice that you would give yourself to say, hey, all this stuff I've learned, here's what I would like to know going forward, or here's what I wish I would have done different in the very beginning?
So I think our first property, we were members of Odyssey, but I don't think we took advantage of all the things we could have in the beginning. We bought our condo that's close to that in Cocoa Beach. We used Mike Whitfield to set it up. There's some cost to that, but he came in and that condo just blew up when we did that. I wish we would have done that in the beginning with the other property too. I think just taking advantage and not trying to recreate the wheel. I think there's some cost to it, but there's also cost to not doing it. And so lost revenue, just mistakes. So we're so glad that we did that. Here comes my UPS driver. So if my dog goes crazy.
Okay, we'll listen for the dog. Oh, there we go. That's awesome. We'll splice this out, right? We'll get that part spliced out. We'll make sure. I don't ever edit the episodes, but we might have to edit
that one.
Right. Awesome. Gina, what about you? What are some of the what would you say as far as lesson?
I think the sewer thing is a huge thing, but I agree with Jason. Like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Do what has been successful for others. But on the other hand, like, we learn lessons. We learn from them. We know now what to do, what not to do. And I think, possibly going with your gut. Like, yeah, I don't think this is going to work. Okay, let's just stick with it and don't second guess yourself. But the education and the following successful people, that's a big thing.
Yeah, I love it. And I appreciate you. Like, it is, right? It's like there's a process that has worked. We can duplicate it. And to Jason's point, there's a cost to it, right? It costs more money. And a lot of times that front end cost is what keeps people from not doing it and say, I'm going to try it a different way, right? But we do that because we feel like the return on the back end is better, right? Because you're going to maximize faster. You're going to make more money in the long run. The ROI on that investment is going to be higher than trying to save it on the front end. But it's a decision that has to be made, and it's a decision you have to make almost every single time, because the next property you're going to be looking at, you're going to be like, okay, the cost to do this is X amount higher versus the other way. But now that you've seen both ways, it's going to be an easier decision for you. And I appreciate you saying that, because that's a decision point for a lot of people, again, that they get to say, okay, do I lean all in and do this? But if you've seen it proved out, if you've seen the success and it does have some track record of working, there's no reason to go and reinvent the wheel, because that can be really expensive as well. And
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. This has been a great conversation. I know, it's always, I'm so grateful when people are willing to have these types of conversations and let other people listen in. And so I appreciate you joining me today. It's been awesome. It was great seeing you guys a month ago. Excited to see what you guys are building and doing in the future. And I appreciate you having this conversation with me on the podcast today.
Great. Thanks, Shawn.
Thank you for having us.
Yep, absolutely. And those of you listening, We know how valuable your time is as well, and we appreciate you joining us. And if you got any value out of this show, I always ask you a couple favors at the end of the episodes. The first one is, if you do have value and you know somebody else that would like to be a part of these conversations, walk into the short-term rental game with their eyes wide open. That's our number one goal here at Odyssey, is to help people do that. Share the show. We don't run sponsorships or ads. The only way this show grows is if you guys organically share it. And so we do appreciate that if you will. And then if you have more than 30 seconds, like it, review it on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And then the final, most important thing that I ask you at the end of every episode is pick that one thing you can do today to start building that life you don't want to take a vacation from. Cheers, my friends.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Vacation Rental Revolution podcast. Share this with other people you think need to hear about it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Hey Grace, is there a website?
Yes! For more amazing content and expert advice, visit Odyssey.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.